Greetings. Welcome back to another episode of Willing Warriors. This is episode number 22 that we've called, well, not really titled, but it's more along the mechanics of courting. So in our last episode of 21, we talked more about, it was the framework of winning our child's heart and setting things up, not when they're 15 or 16 years old, but more when they're little bitty. And we talk down the road about, what is a good thing to find in a wife or a husband before the hormones kick in. So anyway, but we have been very blessed to live in a culture in our church that had a lot of embraced the concept of courting. So it wasn't a foreign idea. There wasn't a youth group where there was multiple couples getting together every week. But others, we lived in a culture where other families had the same idea and started the same framework with many of their children. And so it wasn't like a competition, I guess. But this episode is more about the frame. Well, we did the framework in 21, the tactics, how we got to now that we have 6 of our children married, and 4 more to go, Lord willing. So we're going to hopefully tackle that this time around.
So the framework, we set it up, and now this is the how-to. And in this short 20 some minutes, we can't cover every hypothetical situation. So we're going to try to cover some big points here, right? So first off, my wife mentioned youth group. So if you're in a church and there's a youth group, and the youth group is a hotbed for emotional romances, such that the kids are breaking up and switching and going to this one and going to that one, going to this one, right? I don't want to say it any stronger. Find a different church. Find a different church, right? Don't stir up love before this time. These kids are going through this. They're getting together. They're learning how to break up. They're being trained to divorce. They're being trained to divorce. So let's try the positive side. So we have a son and a young lady catches his interest. Let's say we have a daughter and she catches some young man's interest. So what would we like to do? I'm going to speak of it from the father of a daughter. And so the young man could approach my daughter saying, "Oh, you want to go out? Well, I've won my daughter's heart. I've won my daughter's heart." And this, as my wife said, from the headwaters of their life. So my daughters would say, "Well, it might be better for you to talk to my dad." Now, there's going to be a whole bunch of guys that are going to say, "Oh, I don't want to talk to her dad." Well, they're not too serious. And I didn't even do anything, but they're chased away. Now, the guys that are serious says, "I'm really interested in her. I'm going to stick my neck out and talk to her dad." Now, others that might be living in the culture, know what's going on. They're saying, without approaching my daughter, they're going to contact me anyways. And then I'm going to start with some high-level questions. "Oh, you're interested in my daughter. What do you want to do with her?" "Oh, I want to get together with her and I want to go out and have fun." Well, if you want to go have fun, go find some guys to go hang out with, right? And so then they could say, "Well, I'm interested in your daughter." And I said, "Okay, well, what's on your mind?" "Well, I've got marriage on my mind somewhere. I don't know if she's the right one." "Oh, okay. Well, when do you think you could be ready for marriage?" "Well, about 10 years. "Well, why don't you come back in about 9 years, right?" So hopefully the young man's ready for this, and then dad has a chance to start discerning, right? And so 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, we might chase away because they're probably not ready to leave in Cleveland anytime soon. We don't start a relationship for years. We don't call dibs. We don't come back, right? That just creates all kinds of craziness. So what we try to think about is from the time they might start courting, doesn't mean it's going to happen. Could they be married within the year? And if that's the case, then we'll say, "Oh, let's consider it." As I'm talking to the young man, I'm talking to my daughter, and I'm kind of being the go-between initially, just to get an initial evaluation. But what we're doing here is we don't want to start the car. We don't want to get a relationship going and then tell them, "You can start the car, but you can't take it for a drive," right? Scripture says flesh burns, and we have to realize it. So we don't want to stir up love before it's time, but when it's time, we want to stir it up. We want to stir it up in still a controlled fashion so nobody does get burned. So maybe, my dear, you want to cover this from a young lady's perspective with her dad being involved and what that looks like and how they respond.
So I always sort of, I don't know if this is a proper terminology or not, but sort of thinking of it as you fencing, sort of, providing a fence around our daughters. So if somebody approaches Kevin and he might go to our daughter and say, well, so-and-so approached me. Are you interested? And if she's like, oh, no, Dad, I'm not, then he'll just say, thank you for your interest, but, we're not interested in pursuing. He doesn't have to give reasons or anything else, but he just protects her in that way. If she is interested, then
Her interest may not mean I'm ready to marry him.
Right, yeah. But maybe just to get to know each other better. But even before young man shows up to pursue, Dad's already sat down with the daughter and said, okay, what are the deal breakers? And it, well, I don't think I want to marry somebody who's massively in debt, or somebody who's, I don't know, extremely overweight, or maybe he's been married before, or, we don't have sort of the same belief system, so there are definite deal breakers, and it's good for Dad to sort of know beforehand. And, then, like I said, just sort of putting a fence around and protecting her. But if there is a young man that, you said, okay, well, and she's agreed, yeah, I'd be interested in getting to know him better, to make a purposeful possibilities, opportunities for them to get together. But it's not alone. It's more like, oh, well, why don't you come over for dinner? And so the family, there's nothing more intimidating than a 5-year-old sister who's going to check him out, right? Make awkward jokes, see how people respond to those sort of opportunities. Come over for, a family celebration or a game night. Join us for church on Sunday or after church. And that way, like I said, he gets to meet us. But initially we don't say, okay, well, you guys go out and, go get to know each other. Generally, like you said, flesh burns, and I wouldn't seek opportunity to be alone for a long period of time with another man. And I don't think that you would do that either. So, with a woman. Yeah, of course.
So, as this relationship is, we're getting to know the young man, maybe he's somebody that's grown up in church, we know him quite well. Maybe someone we just approached or just approached us, and so we're getting to know him more and more and more. Well, while he's getting to know while he's engaging with our family and our daughter has a chance to evaluate him, I have a chance to evaluate him one-on-one. And so if he's in town, I would get together with him on a regular basis. What am I trying to discern? I'm trying to discern his trajectory. I'm trying to determine what baggage he is. I want to be able to tell my daughter, this is a respectable man. He's not perfect. There are none. There was one, but he got crucified. And he's on a good trajectory. And so I'm going to ask some really hard questions that I don't want my daughter to ask. I have to be asking, right? Are you given to pornography? When was the last episode? What are you doing to get rid of it? How are you killing this sin, right? How about the debt? How do you treat your mother? Tell me about your last job. What happened there? You lost your job? So I'm going to be asking some really discerning questions, and I want to make sure that this is going to be my son-in-law, that he's not a fool. I don't want my daughter to have to marry a fool that's going to have more children and have more fools. So I'm asking some really hard questions that she might not want to ask. And then I'm going back to her, I don't have to tell her all the details, but I'm kind of giving her a version, a slimmed down version of that, something that would be edifying. And if anywhere along the way I said, dear, this is really a red flag, then her and I will talk and we'll decide, let's stop the relationship. And then I'll tell the young man, thank you very much. And then he might say, why? And no, we're not going on a guilt trip. We're just stopping the relationship. There's 1,000 reasons to stop, right? Before you're married, after you're married, there's just a handful. So Dad might stop it beforehand, and Dad would do it as he's talking to his daughter. So that's going on behind the scenes, right? Trying to figure out what he's doing, where he's going. What I don't want to do is I want to make sure that the young man's out, he's established, he's not a fool. I don't want him out looking for a mother that's going to nurture him and take care of him. I want to know that he's out, has established himself, and he's looking for someone to join him on his mission. So, how would you counsel our daughters as they're getting to know a young man?
Well, and you've already mentioned this, but as she's observing when he's in our home, interacting with siblings or parents, or as she has occasionally possibly to meet his family, how does he treat his mom? How does he treat his sisters? Because that's usually a pretty good perception of how he's likely going to end up treating her, should they get married. So just, oftentimes we're given to, like I think you mentioned before, oh, he's so handsome or he's so strong but like you said, it's good to be attracted to the other person, but at the same time, that shouldn't be your qualifying. Especially as women, I would say, do you respect him? Do you know the direction that he wants to go? The things he'd like to possibly do in life? And that might change down the road, but if, just flying by the seat of his pants and not having any direction, do you want to get, tossed into that mix? So, basically just, do I respect him, and can I see myself going in that same direction?
Yeah, so our young ladies think about it right there in our house for 20 years, roughly. And then they're going to get married, and they could be in this man's house for 50, 60, 70 years. So we want to help her to see that, make that evaluation. So early on, instead of the dating relationship, it often evolves into a physical aspect, and the hormones are flowing, and it feels so good, and they're Twitter-pated, and they can't see. Their mind is just a flush, and they can't make any more rational decisions. We want to maintain this early phase is a highly rational basis where dad and daughter are talking, and they're interviewing, and we're trying to get to know the guy, and we're picking up characteristics, and we're making an evaluation. And so as we're making those evaluations, dad is setting the ground rules, right? This is what you're allowed to do. This is where you're allowed to go. And it's got to be crystal clear. But once the daughter has gotten to a place and dad says, yeah, I think he's a good guy, right? And she says, yeah, he's a good guy and I really like him and I want to follow him and I want to, possibly go further with this. Then after some level of evaluation, and we're talking here probably some months, right? Then I would give permission to this young man to say, now, you can win my daughter's heart. What does that mean, win her heart? Well, you can write her poetry. You can buy her flowers. You can take her out for a nice date. You can do these things, right? You can take her out in a nice dinner. You can seek to win her heart, but do it in an honorable manner, not in the backseat of the car, but something that is honorable, that you can tell story about everything that you ever did to your children and to your grandchildren. And then while he's doing that, I am still heavily involved in asking him for, well, tell me where you're going, tell me when you're going to be back, tell me the time. And so now we give them that chance to say, okay, go win her heart, right? After there's been this evaluation that's going on. So as he's winning her heart, maybe you can talk about that next threshold that usually involves a ring.
Well, before I do that, I want to backtrack just a little bit. You asked about what other counsel I might give to the daughters. And again, the big word was respect. But then going forward, do you respect him enough that you are willing to submit to him? Because once you're married, you'll be called to submit. And the last other piece of advice would be, yeah, he's really nice, but maybe I don't like this, but he'll change. Don't ever go into marriage. I'm sure most of you have heard this, thinking I'm going to change the person or they will change, because generally one doesn't. It's not that someone never does, but don't go into marriage with that expectation. So, okay, once we're down, the dad's granted permission. to win her heart, then the next thing might be, if things progress, is that we would strongly encourage the young man and would expect the young man to ask dad for his daughter's hand in marriage. It's just a respectful, it's an honoring thing, because there is at the marriage altar, from under dad's authority will be given to her husband's authority. So there is a change there. And also, Kevin always encourages them to have, it doesn't have to be, necessarily a very expensive proposal, but, oh, hey, you want to get married? It's got to be a little bit more than that. Make it something memorable, something that you, like you said, the grand story you can tell, the fun story you can tell to your children and your children's children. And then once they are engaged, then we encourage them generally to keep the engagement short. If you've gone this far and now we've committed, you're not half married, you're still not married, but we want to get that direction pretty quickly. So, we encourage the short engagements.
So this is where dads have to really be up on their game once the young couple is engaged, because the hearts are coming closer. They want to act like they're 3/4 of the way married, 99% of the way married, but they're not. It's absolutely binary. So they want to get more and more physically involved with each other, and they're drawing closer and closer. And this is where dad says, no, boundaries, right? Because we want to get to the marriage altar. And so dad has to say and do hard things. He may have to redirect the level of physical activities in the clearest terms possible. If he says they can touch, he needs to say they can touch hands, not private parts. He needs to say if they kiss on the cheek, it's on the cheek, and it's for a short time, not for a long heated embrace. And so he just has to be crystal clear. If he's not, remember, they're not thinking. Their whole mind is clouded now, right? And so Twitter-pated, right? So dad's responsibility is to deliver her to the altar as a virgin, right? And to help his sons get there as well. So hopefully he's won their hearts. He's giving clear commands. He's setting boundaries, keeping the engagement time as quick as possible. So we want to deliver her, and we want him to be there as virgins. We don't want them to have this baggage of trust issues, or saying, I couldn't, you weren't trustworthy when we were engaged. How do I know you're trustworthy after we're married, right? We don't want to have that. We want to show up and I know I'm talking about an optimistic standpoint. We're raising kids that way, right? That's our purpose. Some of us may have baggage issues, but we don't want that for our children. So you maybe want to talk a little bit about whether it's a formula or what we're trying to address here.
Well, it's not a formula. We wish it sometimes was just a chemical formula. If you do this and this and this, then this and this and this will happen. But it is, we feel, applying wisdom. And there are a lot of people, even in today's Christian culture, that will think that this is tyrannical or outdated, antiquated, fill in the blank. But God's word does address it. He addresses all forms of relationships, and the very important one that he uses as his own example of the bride and Christ as the groom. And so we too should take it very seriously. And so it's not a formula, but we do want to develop and have a vision for, this is a glorious story. This has a purpose. And what is God's purpose? And does he give at least, parameters on the relationship? So I think that you probably heard over and over and over is, dads, be involved with your daughters and win their hearts and protect them and give them the direction and, not leave them floundering or to fend for themselves.
So if you would, let me close it out here. So remember where we're going, right? So the world's formula for dating has horrific results. So remember what Scripture says: don't stir up love before it's time. I put it a different way with my kids. I said, let's not play with fire because you're gonna get burned. But what I do go and tell them is once they do get married, burn the house down, right? Burn it down. Enjoy. God has given this to you. So remember how we're taught to pray, how our Heavenly Father, or how Jesus has taught us to pray. He says, we're taught to pray, Father, lead me not into temptation. And so we want to win our children's hearts so that they're saying, Dad, please lead me not into temptation, but deliver me from evil. Lead me in paths of righteousness. And dads, they need our help. They've never been here before, and they need our help. So parents, we want to encourage you to be willing warriors, to live differently than this world, so that your children and your grandchildren will have different examples. And may God be glorified. Thank you for joining us.